So this morning, September 7th, Monday, it's Labor Day. So happy Labor Day, everyone. And the text that we looked at this morning, or that we listened to this morning, was from Luke chapter 6. This is 6 through 11. On another Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. And there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees watched him, Jesus, to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath so that they might find an accusation against him. Even though he knew what they were thinking, he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come and stand here." He got up and stood there. And Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it?" After looking around at all of them, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was restored. They were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. So there are a handful of things I thought were just interesting with this, and Jesus heals, and he does something. He does an act of mercy and compassion and restoration to this man with the withered hand, and then of course the religious leaders consider as they're filled with fury, they consider what they will do to Jesus. And I think there's just interesting moments to ponder that, the movement of God, which is filled with compassion and healing, as opposed to the movement of those caught up in religious tradition that can sometimes lead toward fury and hate. But I think, another thought that I had is just that this, as there were so many Sabbaths, that this man must have lived with chronic illness, right? With a chronic condition. If you think of the purpose of a Sabbath, right? The Sabbath is so, there's many purposes, but one of the central ones is this idea of rest, right? This idea of being able to just rest in God's presence and rest in the presence of the God who heals and restores. And so in many ways, if you've ever had a chronic ailment, that rest is it's not really possible. and here, in so many ways, what Jesus is doing is he is finally equipping this man to experience rest. He's equipping him to be able to observe the Sabbath with heart, soul, mind, and his strength. That his body is able to find rest finally. And so in some ways he's allowing and enabling this person to receive rest. And of course the essential theme of the text is this idea that Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and that was something that sort of bucked the tradition of resting, the way that the religious leaders understood it. And here we are, sheltered in place. Our weekly Sunday liturgies of connecting with one another in person and singing and praying and looking at God's Word, and all that is disrupted. It's been disrupted for going on 7 months now, and it's challenging. And the religious ceremony that we are used to, that we are so sort of entrenched in, as in our own stories, that religious ceremony isn't really able to take place the way we're used to it taking place. And here you have the religious ceremony of Sabbath, with this man and the scribes and the Pharisees, and Jesus shows, and for me this was the big takeaway this morning, is that the healing movements of God are not bound by religious ceremony, and that God is always at work. And so our religious ceremony is not what we're used to it being, and yet the healing, restorative movements of God are not bound by religious ceremony, that God is bigger than that. God can heal in all places at all times, and I believe that God is healing in all places and all times, even as we gather online, we gather on Zoom. God is bigger than that, and He is not bound by our religious ceremonies, that He is still able, that He is still willing, that He is still great, and He is still good. So may it be so today and in the days to come.